Security testing is something which is pivotal and mandatory to establish a safe transformation for both the employees and the customers.
Quality is the responsibility of the team. The QA professional needs to be that subject matter expert.
Get QA involved as early as you're determining the strategy.
Agile needs a QA mindset that is completely changed. If you have a guy who's coming into Agile with a waterfall mindset, then that guy is not a QA.
Hello, and welcome to the Future Strategies in Engineering Quality series, brought to you by the Business Transformation Network and their editor and your host, me, Claudia Falzon. This interview was part of a video series in partnership with A1QA. A1QA is a next-generation software testing provider offering a full range of QA services for more than 19 years. As always, if you enjoy our podcast, please subscribe and leave a review. All links from the conversation will be shared in the show notes or whichever app you listen to your podcasts on. You can also watch the full series at the btn.tv. So let's go ahead and get straight into it. Today with us, we are joined by James Vignoles, who is the Quality Director at Sophos Labs. Now today, James will look at discussing how organisations can embed QA throughout a digital transformation project. So thank you so much for joining us today, James. If you could just start by giving us a little introduction to yourself and your role for our listeners.
I'm Quality Director for Sophos Labs. We do a lot of protection and my role really is to make sure we don't break our customers.
Amazing, thank you for that. So starting with the first question, how do you embed QA through a digital transformation project?
The exact nature is going to vary for every project transformation that you're involved with. What I do think is there are common areas where QA add value. It's as simple as that, and I think kind of taking it out of the specifics, the QA professional, quality is the responsibility of the team. First of all, everybody's now accepting that. Long gone are the days of throwing it over the wall. But the QA professional needs to be that subject matter expert. There's a resource for the team. Equally, often the requirements are totally focused on the customer, the features that are being delivered or the fix that's going out. So again, the QA professional needs to be setting the requirements for the quality process, for the deliverables, and for the gates. Whether can we go, and once we've gone, are we successful? Knowing that we've achieved what the project was meant to. Always, we have to have a repeatable process. We very rarely do we have a project where you do it once and throw it away. Much as the developers might like that, really, there's a life cycle of the project, including through to end of life. So. Another role or area of added value is making sure that repeatable process and operation is quality. Automation is often used, but it's all important to remember that rubbish in gives rubbish out. So, making sure you're automating the right things is important, or right process. Defining the time limits. Again, automation can suck an awful lot of time for something that actually you're only going to run once or twice. So make sure you're spending the right amount of time on the automation. If you can't do it in a set amount of time, don't do it. My favorite actually is making automation a deliverable, especially if you're working with multiple teams. You've got the teams have to support the life cycle. That automation of the unit tests or the test cases or whatever it is needs to be a deliverable. Another very important area is being that critical friend or the devil's advocate, asking what and why and not accepting the first answer. Not quite the 5 whys of a root cause analysis, but getting to maybe 3, and then reviewing results, auditing the process that's been done, the compliance to the quality gates, that side of things. But in summary, you embed QA to provide QA expertise, quality evangelism, and that's quite different from QA, and also a critical friend to the project. In my younger days, quality to me was no bugs being reported from the field. Now in a much more pragmatic and experienced role, it's the right level of bugs being reported from the field, the right type of bugs being reported. You capture the critical ones. You don't waste your time trying to find the spelling mistake. on that side of it. But that success is going to be different for every project. And that's where the QA professional needs to be involved right at the start, because they're defining what success looks like. The product manager is involved, and they'll be defining it from one view. But between dev, QA, and the PM, you've got to have that. What is success? What do we mean by quality? Are we looking for 7 nines? Are we looking for actually we don't need to be? We're just a fun toy to play with. What's the reputation and impact of issues, and how do you assess that? And they're all questions that need to be asked and defined, the answers as requirements. The project is going to be successful if it's met X, Y, and Z.
Absolutely. What a great point there. Thank you. So, James, would you say that Agile needs QA, or would you say that QA needs Agile to be successful?
QA in Agile is just a role undertaken by members of the team. As such, you wouldn't need a QA professional. If you don't have a QA professional, you do need to provide QA training so that the people know what the role means. There's no point giving somebody a role if you don't teach them what that role entails. So effectively, you almost create your own QA professionals because you've trained them. Because Agile needs QA. We need to do it, but it's just a role that could be undertaken by anybody on that team. Shared load for manual testing, automation, they're all given to the team on that side of it. Obviously, depends on the type of project as to whether you train up the dev team and rely them, or do you bring in QA professionals? If you budget might be an impact there. The type of project might be an impact. To have a QA professional trained up to work alongside every threat researcher who's working in a team of one isn't feasible. Fundamentally, those researchers have to take on the role of QA for their work. They are a team of one, therefore they take on that. We provide them with the resources and the training, for want of a better term, but the help to achieve that. Looking at it from the other side, does QA need Agile to be successful? Well, we kind of touched on that previously. If you're going to be successful, QA has to be early, it has to be continuous, and it has to be involved in the decisions, preferably driven by risk and data. It has to have clear success criteria. All of this is required, and they're provided by Agile.
And what does an optimized testing infrastructure actually look like, would you say?
Frictionless integration in an end-to-end pipeline. I'll walk away now. It's got to be easy. It's got to be frictionless. It can't, you're not going to get the perfect frictionless ability, but you want to reduce the effort involved either in expansion or, in improvements, etc. If it's not easy to update, it's not easy to use, if it's not easy to make part of your whole pipeline, you're going to have problems and people aren't going to use it. On the other side of it, it needs to have that authority to stop. There's 3 areas to look at. You've got the testing side where it's got to support testing at multiple levels. It's got to be able to do tests for a single change. I'm submitting my change, does it still work? It's got to be able to do tests where you're taking multiple changes together and putting them there. So whether it's single team or multiple teams, single developer or multiple, it doesn't matter. It needs to be able to test their changes and give them the right level of response to know whether it's good or bad. Looking at it more as part of the pipeline, it's got to support the deliverables from the dev teams. Their quality deliverable will be the automation or will be the tests, whatever they are. We've got to maximize coverage with every release. You can't have releases going out where the coverage is static. It's got to improve every time. Therefore, it's got to support that. It's got to be able to take that in. Big area for friction, one of the hardest ones to reduce. Another area that it's got to do is compliance. More and more people are getting compliance for ISO, FedRAMP, SOC, whichever one it is. You've got to support that. And again, coming back to that stop on failure, as part of the compliance, if something's not met, the system has to stop and ask for a human, basically, or kick it back to be redone. Because what you can't have is, the compliance is often about, one developer should not be able to build, test, and release. Well, actually, we're building automation that build, tests, and releases. We've got to build in that, prove that ability to stop at any one of those points if the compliancy has not been met. And that's going to be one of the key. That's the key part to making a system auditably friendly on that side. And the final aspect, it has its own life cycle and investment. This is as much a product as the product you're releasing. Obviously, its life is tied to the life of the product it's supporting, but you need a roadmap of changes, features. There has to be SLO, SLIs, and it has to have an end of life. We've got a system that's been very effective for the last 30 years, but it's 30 years old, and it's creaking because it's 30 years old of organic growth. You've got to build that in. It's got to be considered as much a product as the product itself. It's one of those deliveries from the team.
Wow, what a great point. Thank you, James. So moving on to the last question, we just wanted to ask, what 3 aspects of digital transformation should QA professionals be involved in?
There are opportunities rather than involvement. There are opportunities at every stage for a QA professional. They will vary. And in some of them, they're going to be much more mission critical. Some of them, they're going to be less if you're talking about a startup. I think there are 3 aspects of involvement where the QA can add the most value. What does success look like for the digital transformation, for the project? I think that's one of the key ones, asking that question of, not just what does the product success look like to our customers, but what's success like for our quality, what's success like for our automation, asking those questions, getting those gates or success criteria defined. The second area, I think, is, in that devil's advocate role. Is this the right thing to be doing? Which is an interesting one, because often QA is told, this is the expected result, go and prove it. Well, actually, we can be more than that. That's one aspect of it. But are we doing the right thing? Are we doing the right thing for the customer? Are we doing the right thing for the project or for this operation? And again, it's those requirements that aren't necessarily as obvious, where a QA professional can come in and say, well, what about? What are you doing in this area? How are you doing this? Making sure that we're meeting the quality requirements, we're adhering to all the process that we've defined. And then the final area really is the process repeatable, effective, efficient, simple, frictionless operation, automation, whichever way you want to look at it. But are we automating the right things, the right process? Does the process work before we try and automate it? Often not. We'll start the automation before we know the process actually works. Always an interesting result there, and often takes longer to get to the right end than if you started a manual process and then automated it. Where tests are not suitable, making sure that load is shared. There isn't, break down that, don't throw it, or don't, make sure don't throw it over the wall stays in place. But those are the kind of the 3 areas I see where the added value from a QA professional is.
Wow, some really strong points made there. So I think that has that's concluded our discussion really, really nicely. So thank you so much for joining us today, James. We've really enjoyed having you on here. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. We really hope it gave you a little bit more of an insight into the future strategies in engineering quality. To learn more about A1QA and quality assurance services, please visit a1qa.com. For more content like this, please subscribe to the BTN website. We hope to see you next time for another fascinating conversation.